you just get discouraged really easily. So just don't let yourself get discouraged. Enjoy the process. You got this, just keep on it and just be stubborn about the whole thing.
That was Cassie Greutman sharing her advice for authors working on their first book. Stay tuned to hear more about Cassie's journey as a writer on Pages and Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. We'll be back after the intro. Welcome to the Local Author Podcast, sponsored by the Allen County Public Library. This podcast is dedicated to featuring the works of talented authors within our community and highlighting their unique voices and perspectives. Today's author guest is Cassie Greutman. Cassie is a small-town Ohio girl who has always loved stories in any form. You can usually find her typing away at her computer or playing out in the barn with her ponies. Welcome to Pages and Voices, Cassie.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. My name is Cassie Greutman, and I write fantasy fiction, urban portal, a little epic fantasy thrown in. I love it all. I've been writing books since I was a young kid and have stapled together handwritten copies my mom saved for me as proof.
That's awesome.
I love a good story in any format. When I'm not writing or reading, I'm out in the barn hanging out with my horses.
Well, that sounds like fun. I love that. Horses and writing, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
So you're going to share a brief reading from your book.
Yes.
Okay. But before we have you do that, I'm just going to tell the listeners a little bit about it, and then I'll have you jump right in.
Sounds great.
Okay. So one foster kid, two worlds. If she can't catch a dangerous convict, she's going to lose the only thing she cares about in either of them, her foster parents. After years of being shoved from home to home, 16-year-old Trisha Pinchant finally found a foster family that she won't admit she loves. Life is looking up. Until the night she wakes up in the woods covered in blood. Her supernatural ability saved her life, but it put her on the radar of the Ferry Council, who gave her an ultimatum: catch an escaped fugitive or be taken to Ferry, a place her missing mother told her horror stories about. Trying to appease the council, keeping her powers hidden from her foster parents, and learning to work with the ex-boyfriend who killed her, Trisha's brushes with death are on the rise. Pushed to the brink, she struggles to walk a fine line of doing what's right and doing what's necessary. Her choice will change lives forever. Okay, Cassie, you're up.
Okay. So this is partway through the book, but one of my favorite sections. So a mile on city roads should have only taken a person 15 minutes. Out here, where we had to dodge around rocks and massive trees, it was a good half hour before Cray stopped us, looking out into a dished valley. The energy is coming from that hill, Cray said. It was the first time I'd heard him speak. His voice was surprisingly deep. Trisha, Starren said. Yeah, I know. Go be bait. Be careful, Wade said. Strange coming from the guy that had killed me last week. And I still wasn't sure when they weren't trying to kill me now. Something seemed off about this whole situation. I ignored him, took a breath, and started down the slight grade. It leveled off after a couple minutes, and soon after the trees thinned. But before they were gone, I paused, staring at a strange hill in the middle of the forest floor. I feel you, Atreyu. I hope this doesn't turn out to be a giant turtle. I don't want to get snotted on, I muttered. I'd probably watched too many movies at the children's home. Something about the two worlds in that one made me think about Fairy, thereby reminding me of my mom. I'd watched The Never-Ending Story a bajillion times. I glanced back at the trees, hoping to see Starren. For once, I wanted her to tell me what to do. They were gone. They're probably just trying to get me killed, I snarled quietly. If I didn't know that the Fae couldn't lie, I'd be running the other way right now. It was get this job done or get dragged to some world I didn't know anything about, with people I didn't know. I'd had enough of that growing up, thank you very much. A step, another, something sniffed. I froze. I didn't move for a few seconds, then almost laughed at myself. A sniff, really? Was that Jaden's new unknown power, a super sniffer? I laughed at myself quietly until the sound came again, louder and longer. Okay, no way that was Jaden. A bear? That would not be cool. I'd heal while it did the damage, but how long until it decided to let me be? Ouch. I backed a few steps away slowly. The earth began to shudder, nearly knocking me to the ground. The little hill shook, dirt rained down as something stood up from beneath it, knocking the soil from its body. My fingernails bit into my hands. Maybe a bear wouldn't have been so bad. This thing was massive, its stony-looking head nearly as tall as the trees. Without warning, whatever it was moved over to the small stand of trees and ripped one out by the roots. It paused to get its bearings, more dirt raining down off its grayish skin. Oh crap, I whispered as its gaze finally found me. It hefted the tree up like a club and took a step in my direction, covering the distance between us in that one stride. The club came down hard, right at me. I jumped to the side and it missed. The impact of the club on the ground still knocked me off my feet, dirt and small stones raining down on me. A fist-sized rock slammed into my arm. I rolled over to stand and a crunch sounded from my pocket. Shoot again, my phone. I pulled it out. The screen was shattered. Great. No time to worry about it right now. I stuffed it back in and moved into a crouch. The troll took a step toward me, ground shaking under its massive foot. So this was why California had so many earthquakes. So much for the fault theory. I'm gonna rip your head off your body, the troll finally got out. I could barely hear the words, his voice was so deep. I wished I hadn't been able to understand, because for the first time since I'd started regenerating, I felt a threat of panic. How did that work? Even I probably couldn't recover from that. Starn, Wade, where are you? I muttered under my breath.
Thank you for sharing that action-packed scene. It's going to tempt our listeners for sure. So I do want to talk about the book, but we're going to kind of start at the beginning. How old were you when you wrote your first story?
My first full-length story I wrote at 16, full-length book. I thought that was where I had started until my mom pulled a box off the shelf one day and opened it up, and there was a whole pile of books in there I had written as a kid that she had stapled together and I had illustrated. So apparently it started fairly young.
Oh, that's great. Was it always fantasy?
Basically, yes. The very early ones were just pets.
Yeah.
I've always been an animal person. So the early ones were pets, but I quickly morphed into those pets being dragons and, and to fantasy things.
Breathing fire.
Yes.
So from one of your bios, I know that you were an avid reader growing up. Do you have favorite authors?
My favorite set of books that I read repeatedly as a kid were the Enchanted Forest Chronicles by Patricia C. Reed.
Sure.
They're hilarious. They're about a princess who has an arranged marriage that she doesn't want. And so she runs away and volunteers to work for a dragon instead of the dragon kidnapping her. But that, of course, sends all kinds of knights and princes to come save her, which she's very annoyed by.
Sure.
Yeah.
She sounds like a strong woman if
Yes.
she's going to go work for a dragon on her own. So the fantasy genre seems to be your jam, right?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And so did you set out to write a fantasy series? When did that dream begin?
As we were talking about a minute ago, basically all my stories have been fantasy since I was a kid. They always used to be epic fantasy, set in other worlds and that type of thing. But as urban fantasy became more popular, that's what I really started to enjoy reading, and just the fun of being able to think of magic in our world. So that's where I went from there into the urban fantasy stories.
Okay. I just sort of dipped my toes into it, I guess, with the Discovery of Witches. Have you read those by Deborah Harkness?
I have not, but I've heard very good things.
Well, I was kind of confused at first because I was like, where's the world building? And I'm like, oh, dude, really don't need world, too much of it. Some maybe, but no, not a lot. I don't know. So anyways, I had to wrap my head around that a little bit. But it's great books, great movie. So when did you decide how old were you, I guess, when you decided I'm going to write the Tricia Pynchon stories?
Yes, I was probably around 20 when I first started the story. My parents were always foster parents when I was a kid. And so I wanted a story where the foster parents were good people. Yeah. And so the idea of having a Fae girl living in the human foster care system came to me. And then we went from there. I understand why in most stories foster parents are terrible people, because it's difficult to have kids off on adventures without the parents being involved. But this was a way I found that I could combine those things.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. You did a good job of it. So you wrote the first one, you started the first one when you were 20, and there's 4.
Yes.
How many years were in between these?
So the first one took me several years because I was learning my craft as I went along. Okay. I did have several books that I wrote before that. They say on average, an author will write around 7 books before they actually publish because of all of the learning that goes into it. So most authors have a few unused manuscripts sitting on their laptop.
That will never see the light of day.
That will never see the light of day, exactly. So the first one took me around 3 years, and I just kept going back and changing things as I learned and got better at it. And since then, they're going quicker.
Okay, so when did the last one come out?
I want to say that was 2023.
So this one looks like the first one came out in 2018.
Yes.
The copyright's 2018. And then so there's 4, like I said. And then the last one, so 2022.
Yes. So I actually
So
have
you started to move along.
Yes, I did. And then I have a book actually that's in an interconnected series that's out in the new series as well.
Okay.
So it'll be about a different person, but she'll meet people and everything from this series.
Kind of combining the two.
Marvel movie type.
Yeah. Well, hey, I love that. Makes it easier.
It's fun.
Yeah, to interject all that. And get to know them a little bit better.
Yeah.
So I want to read a few of the Goodread reviews right now. Have you read any of these Goodread reviews?
I have not. They say don't read your own reviews because it's scary.
Well, I mean, I don't know how they could be better. So on Goodreads, one reader writes, I've read a lot of YA books, a lot of fantasy books, and a lot of both combined, but I absolutely flew through this. Trisha was such a believable teenage character in voice and personality. And while you often get one in books, you don't always get both. I love the way she just shrugs things off, gets into ridiculous danger, and is sarcastic about it, both during and after. All the characters in Regen, she abbreviated it, are just so real, even when they're zipping about on quest through portals. Another reader wrote, definitely 4.5. Oh my gosh, in all caps. This book had me hooked from page 1, and I literally stayed up just to finish it because I could not put it down. Trisha's journey keeps you on the edge, and the characters are well developed that you feel a connection with them, ready for the next exclamation point. And then one more. I absolutely could not get enough. I adored watching Trish grow into her powers on top of learning how important family is, not to mention the concept of blood doesn't always make a family. A lot of the concepts hit home for me, being an adopted kid. If you enjoy YA fantasy action, then you have just found your new favorite book series. So these are just a few of the very positive reviews from Goodreads.
Wow, that's very encouraging. I'll have to actually check it out.
Yes, you should. There's so many more. I could go, seriously, I have like 5 pages printed off, but I got to cut it off somewhere. So I could go on and on. But you have won some awards for this book. Can you tell us about that?
Yes, and I want to say 2022 won the Indie Author Project for Ohio Award. That was pretty neat. It came with a nice prize, and then everyone was brought to Chicago to a very large librarians conference, so I got to walk around and meet all kinds of neat people. Adina Menzel was there.
Stop.
No, she
really?
was. Her and her sister were talking about a children's book that they had written, and so I got to go in and listen to her speak and then go up and shake her hand
I
afterwards.
I would have fangirled because
Yes.
we have watched Frozen I don't know how many times.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Wicked too. So,
That's
yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, it was quite an interesting time. I had a great time there. And then I also was a top 10 finalist for Regeneration in the Screencraft Most Cinematic Book Competition. And that had 1,200 entries from around the United States. And Screencraft is more on the movie side of things, but it's a very well-known contest. So that I was just tickled about that one as well.
No kidding. So, I had a question out of that. I know I was going to ask, did you put your book forward for these 2 awards, or was this something that somebody else nominated you for?
I entered both of them. Yes.
Okay. And you did that just online, I assume?
Yes. It was actually quite a surprise to win the Indie Author Project because it's over a year from the time that you enter until they give their announcements. So I entered it on kind of a whim because it was one I hadn't known a lot about. And then I was like, oh, this sounds wonderful. And I entered it. And then, it kind of leaves your mind because you don't want to sit there and obsess about it.
Yeah, right. I know.
And then I got the winner announcement by email almost a year later. And I about fell right out of my chair. That was quite exciting.
That is so cool. Do you have to send them your whole document, or do you have to send them a copy of your book, or?
So you send them a EPUB version of your book.
Okay.
And they read the whole thing. So
that's great.
Yeah,
I love it. So, talking about it's actually called Penchant for Trouble, the series, right?
Yes.
So, Penchant for Trouble. So, what came first for you, the plot or the characters?
I'm a characters person. If characters are really interesting, I'll watch a show even if it doesn't have a great plot line. So the characters definitely came first. I mentioned a little bit earlier about the foster family dynamic. So that's what came to me first before I even got to know the characters, was just thinking about, what kind of situations would they be in? What misunderstandings would they have? And so, yeah, characters definitely came first for me.
Okay, great. And so you said you worked on your craft. I don't have this question in my list, but I want to ask it because I think it's important. You said you worked on your craft along the way as you're writing this first one. How did you do that? Did you take classes? Did you read other books?
A lot of reading.
Okay.
So some of it came very naturally to me because of the large amount of books that I read as growing up. You kind of get an idea about how plot lines work. You get an idea of, what senses you should be using, that type of thing, just from the huge amount of reading that I've done.
Right.
But also there's so many good free courses online, YouTube videos. Brandon Sanderson, who I love his books. He has a whole YouTube page and a channel that he just plays all kinds of videos on there about how to write better. So basically just educated myself.
Yeah. Nice. All right. Okay. So you have 4 books in the series. Is the series finished?
There's one more. I had 5 books lightly plotted out when I started. So there's one more for sure that these books have all been leading up to. And then we'll see from there. It depends on how much people really enjoy it and want me to do more, because I do have the other series that is part of this one also.
Okay. So have you begun working on book 5?
I'm about halfway through book 5. Yes.
Okay. So fans should keep their eyes open for that one.
Yes.
And then you did mention the other series while you were talking before. Will you say the name of that series again?
The first book is called Storm of Magic.
Okay.
And it's in the Shadows of Chaos series.
Okay. Storm of Magic. Is that all? Is that the only one that's out currently?
Yes. That one just came out in May.
Okay. I'm sorry. Say Storm of Magic. My brain.
You're good. Shadows of Chaos.
Shadows of Chaos. I knew it was something chaos. Okay. I'm writing it down so I can remember. Thank you. Okay. So we did talk about this. We touched on it briefly, but I want to revisit it. So how long did it take you to write each book?
In the beginning, it took me years for the first couple.
Okay.
And then now, if that's what I can focus on, I can get one done in about 6 months.
That's improved quite a bit.
Improved quite a bit because, and it is easier as you go farther in the series because you have all your characters figured out. Your world is mostly figured out, all of that. So when I was writing the first book in the other series, A Storm of Magic, that did take me a little longer again because I had to recreate everything going into the world. Even though it's the same world, it's a whole different set of characters. Okay. So it's about 6 months now if I have the time to sit down and do that.
Okay. So do you have any advice for writers working on their first book?
Basically, just keep at it. A book is a massive, massive undertaking. You can sit down and write all day, and then you'll be like, oh, wow, I worked so hard. I got so much done. And it's 2,000 words, 2,000 out of 80 to 100,000, words, depending on your genre.
Okay.
So you just get discouraged really easily. So just don't let yourself get discouraged. Enjoy the process. You got this, just keep on it and just be stubborn about the whole thing. I'm a stubborn person.
Be stubborn.
Yes.
That's great advice. So is this your full-time job?
It is not. When I say I'm out with the horses, I actually run a boarding facility. So my full-time job is taking care of 34 horses.
So you're doing this on top of everything else.
Yes.
It's not like you're just sitting down and writing all day long.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So did you have to do made it through partway through Regeneration. Do you have to do world building for the fairy in that book?
So she does not leave for fairy in that book. In book 2, she does actually go to fairy. But people don't understand the world building of like urban fantasy because they're like, well, it's just set in the real world, right? But actually the real world has actual rules and places that people know and that kind of thing. So urban fantasy can actually have more world building sometimes than even epic fantasy because you have to figure out how to put those things together. So you might have to have more ideas and details for your epic fantasy, but it can take longer with your urban fantasy because you have to figure out how things work together.
So, as we know from what you read, so she's a fairy, and then you talked about trolls.
Yes.
So do you have all of the, I want to say characters, but I don't think that that's the right, like vampires, demons, dragons. Do you have all of that in these books?
There are quite a few supernatural creatures.
Thank you.
Yes.
Supernatural creatures is what I was looking for.
But they're based more on like old mythology than they are like vampires, demons, that type of thing. The Fae were actually from Ireland and Scotland and that type of thing. So they're actually a real story, an old story that's starting to come back that I love all of those old.
It puts me in mind a little bit of True Blood or Charlene Harris's books. I can't remember what the first one, Dead After Dark, maybe. I don't know. It was what the True Blood series was based off of. But the Fae was in there, and then they had this creature with these horns. I don't know. It was some ancient creature.
Yeah.
They had all of that too. And I found it fascinating. I would go and read about it. So it helps me learn about stuff like that. So I think that's really neat.
Great.
Yeah. So, any tips on creating characters?
Creating characters is actually what I'm the most natural at. So people have asked me that before, and I had to think about what I do if I have a problem with a character. And if you're more of a plot-driven author and you struggle with characters, the best thing to do is really just flesh them out like a real person. So give them hobbies, give them friends, give them family, work on their backstory a little bit, get to know them like you would get to know a new friend type of thing. And give your characters traits. So if someone is an angry person and they're normally rude, they're going to react very differently to getting their order wrong at McDonald's than somebody that's kind and understanding. So give your character traits, and then if you can't decide how they would react in a situation, go back to those traits, and from there you'll be able to decide what they would do.
Did you ever find yourself not liking your character in your book? Sometimes I was mad that she wasn't including her foster parents a little more.
Yes. You do get frustrated, especially with teenagers.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. I know that for a fact.
So, yeah, you do get frustrated sometimes when they make choices that you would not make. But if all your characters make the choices that you would make, then they're all going to sound exactly the same.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So you just push through the frustration when you're writing this scene and just deal with it.
Yeah. Why would you do that? Well, because she's had a lot of trauma and doesn't trust anyone.
That's right. That's so true. So when you write, I guess maybe the question I really want to ask is, so it took you years to write the first ones, and then you went to 6 months. It got down to 6 months. And you talked a little bit about you had the characters developed, but did you do anything else that was different to get it done in a shorter amount of time?
I think a lot of it is not having to revise as much. So in the beginning, you have to go back when you're learning and you'll be like, oh, that scene doesn't work, or that scene doesn't work, that type of thing. And also I did learn to plot a little better. That you have some authors call themselves pantsers, where they don't even figure out their plot ahead at all and just discover the story. That's how I did the first one. And I did enjoy that because it's more fun because I'm discovering the story as I go. But I did find that I had to go back and set this up in the beginning for the end. And then I had to go back and change this because it didn't match what I said later. So if then I went and swung too far the other way, and I had everything exactly plotted, which took kind of the joy out of writing because then I wasn't discovering the story as I went along, and it became more of a grind. So then I fell somewhere in between where I know the beginning, I know the end, and I know how I'm going to get there in broad terms, but I can have fun just figuring out the story as I go. And that's really helped me speed up too, because
that's a great idea.
Yeah. Then I'm not sitting there for an hour staring at the screen thinking, well, what happens next?
I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's what I found intimidating when I've written stories too. So I like your suggestion of knowing the beginning, knowing the end, and just kind of going for it in the middle and seeing what you come up with. That's
Yeah.
a great idea. So looking at the artwork, the book design, it's really cool. It stands out. I feel like it should glow under like a black light or something, you know, like it's got that vibe. I love it. So did you work with a book designer and an editor on these books?
I did. Yes.
Okay.
I have an editor that was highly suggested to me by a friend, and she does excellent work. I really love what she does. And then the artist asked me about colors, and I'm obsessed with purple. So the first book was purple, and then we kind of moved on from there and just went with different colors.
But I feel like purple, like the first three sort of have a theme, for sure. Absolutely. The fourth one is a little lighter, little summery with the yellow and the green in it. So how did you get connected with the editor? Is that somebody you know? You said it was somebody recommended them to you?
Recommended by a friend, yes.
Okay. Was there a lot of back and forth with the editor when you were with the first one or with any of them?
Yes. So before you even know if you want to work with an editor, you usually send them a sample, and then they do your sample and send it back. And so you can see if you're going to work well with this editor. And nice. I tried a few before I found the one that I really liked. And they were great at their job. Just I felt like they were changing my voice a little bit in ways that I didn't really want.
The ones you didn't go with?
Yes. Oh, and then this lady got the sample back to me, and I said, perfect. And we went from there. And so she went through and did a full edit. Usually they'll do a developmental edit first. So they send you any plot holes they found, characters that need cleaned up, that type of thing. You go through and fix all of the things they sent you from the developmental edit. And then they go through and do a proofreading, line reading edit, which proofreading and line reading are technically can be two different edits. But if the editor is good, they can do them at the same time. So like word usage and that type of thing would go under your line edit, whereas proofreading is typos. Right.
Yeah. So I'm going to move into some fun questions now. This is something I do with all the authors, just a way to get to know you better.
Okay.
So if you could spend the day with another popular author, who would you pick?
I'm going to go with probably Brandon Sanderson. I mentioned him earlier. I really love his work. His world building is insane, and his characters are so cool. Or Patricia Briggs. I also like. He writes more epic fantasy mostly, and then she writes urban fantasy. So she's got some fae in her books and that type of thing too. So it would be fun to talk shop with her.
Do you read a lot of fantasy?
Yes.
So yeah, it makes sense if that's what you love. Why not? I always thought if I wrote a book, I'd write romance because
there you go.
That's like my bread and butter, you know?
Yeah. I'll read anything if it's got good characters and a good plot. I'll read any genre.
I will too.
Yeah. But I gravitate towards the fantasy section.
I find when I'm feeling burnt out from reading other things, I go right back to a romance. These days I'm reading a lot of Emily Henry. She makes me laugh. And
that's important.
Yeah. And I want to laugh. You know, sometimes you just want to have fun reading.
That's right.
Do you celebrate when you finish a book?
I do. My favorite place to eat in town is Flat Top Grill. So I'll run up to Flat Top and go out to eat with my sisters or friends or whoever's available at the moment and just have a nice time up there.
Oh, that's great. That's a good deal. Do you feel like you've taken any risk with your writing that has paid off?
Deciding to go indie publishing was a big risk. I did have an agent that was very interested, but she wanted me to change a lot of things that I wasn't really interested in changing. I'm all for changing, minor things, but basically she wanted it to be a different book. So I hear that a lot, and I didn't really want to do that. So I decided to go out and do it on my own, and it's been very rewarding. It's more difficult because you're in charge of everything.
Yeah. But
at the same time, it's great because you're in charge of everything.
So you now self-publish?
Yes.
Okay, got it. I'm just curious, because I've never done anything like this myself before. What do they ask you to change in your books?
They wanted there to be a love triangle, which is very common in young adult books.
Oh.
I kind of find that overdone. I was not really interested in it. If you've read part of it, there is a bad guy, mm-hmm. and he was supposed to be part of the love triangle. And I find that too often romances make bad boys look so great, and a lot of times girls end up with them. And I wanted her to go for the sweet, wonderful guy.
Thank you.
So
I love that.
So that was something that we were really butting heads on that I was not willing to change.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you didn't. It's like, I don't know. I still sometimes, when I watch, when I think about an old movie, I used to watch Pretty in Pink. Andy, who was played by Molly Ringwald, picks Andrew McCarthy, whose character is Blaine. And I was sometimes, not always, but sometimes I was disappointed that she didn't pick John Cryer, who was Ducky. He had such a crush on her. And he sang her a song in a record store. And I was like, and he was so nice.
How
and
sweet.
Blaine was like the rich, I don't know. He was a good guy, but I don't know. I didn't care for that love triangle. So I'm glad you stuck to your guns.
Thank you.
Yes. So if Penchant for Trouble were made into a TV series, who would play Trisha? Or like, who would play the characters?
That's a really hard one for me because when you create these characters, they're almost like extra family members. You see them in your head as actual people nearly.
Oh, yeah.
So it's difficult to look and just be like, oh, yeah, they're perfect because some traits may not be quite right. So at the moment, I don't have anyone that I would just say, oh, they're perfect for this role. But I'm sure my mind could be changed, but I don't have anybody right away.
I'm trying to think who she makes me think of with the blue eyes and the dark hair. I feel like there's an actress I've seen that looks like that. Anyways, okay, yeah, I know what you mean though, because I mean, I do the same thing when I'm just reading somebody else's work.
Right.
You know?
How many times have you seen reviews and everything that are like, they made this book into a movie and this character is not at all what I thought they were. And,
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So, Harry Potter. I mean,
yes.
I was like, what? What's going on with those characters?
Yes.
I do it all the time. Lord of the Rings, I don't know. Yeah. You get a whole thought going and it doesn't work out.
Right.
So, okay, I have another fun question. What is your dream vacation?
My dream vacation would be to hike Machu Picchu. I am obsessed with mountains, and
Really?
those interesting ruins up there almost feel like a fantasy setting. So
Yeah.
it would be almost like going into one of my books to go up there and hike. That would be amazing.
I can see it in my head, but where is it at?
Peru.
Yes.
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 The
Okay.
mountains in Peru.
Have you done any international travel?
I have. I've gone to Russia, Ukraine, Germany, and South America, some countries in South America. So
When did you go to Russia and Ukraine?
well, that would have been quite a while ago.
Yeah.
Long before the war.
Right.
I have adopted siblings that are from Ukraine. So we went over there to visit them and visit the orphanages there.
Okay.
That would be 16, 17 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you talk about the local connection with the setting being in Fort Wayne?
Yes. So I love Fort Wayne. I'm technically just over the border in Ohio, but there's not much over there. So whenever I want to do anything,
Right.
we come to Fort Wayne. So I wanted to show what a great town it is. So in the series, the town of Fort Wayne is considered a sanctuary for the Fae. So you don't know if your neighbors may have a supernatural power.
Ooh, I love that. Maybe I have to get to know my neighbors better. How can listeners reach you?
So I have a website, www.CassieGreutman.com. You can sign up for my newsletter there, so you would get any type of updates that I send out. I also have Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. So if you look up Cassie Greutman, you'll find me at any of those places. How much I post depends on how far into a book I am. If I'm spending all my time writing posts, then I don't get any book writing done. So if I'm really, really focused on writing at the moment, I might not post that much, but I always answer anybody's messages if they send them to me. So
Okay, great. So last but not least, can you tell us what's next, Cassie?
yes, I'm working on Penchant for Trouble Book 5, Evocation. So that one has a red cover.
You're getting wild.
Yeah, going crazy here. And then I'm also in the works for a comic for that. So I'm working with a comic book artist, and we have the first 6 pages done, and it's looking amazing. It's absolutely epic to see it come to life like that.
So the whole series is coming to life in a comic book?
Eventually, yes. So comic books are much shorter, so
Yes.
it'll be just small chunks of the book until eventually, if the comic book run does well enough, I'll turn it into a graphic novel. So
That's awesome. How did you get connected with the designer for the comic book?
yes, so There are all kinds of ways that you can find an artist. Upwork is a good one. Some on Fiverr, but you got to be real careful there. And then this one I actually found in a Facebook group for artists. I posted I was looking for a comic book artist, and I gave them a little script of the first part of the book. And then I paid several people to send me samples. So I had 10 people that all sent me samples, and the one that I'm working with was by far the best. And so I'm very, very happy about where that's going.
That's exciting. So when your new book comes out, book 5 with the red cover, listeners, readers can find that through all the ways that they can get in touch with you.
Yes.
All right. Well, Cassie, thank you for joining us on Pages of Voices today. It's been a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I've had a lot of fun today.
Great. And thank you to those who listened in. Stay tuned for more authors on Pages of Voices. I'm your host, Meg Bell. Until next time. Thank you for joining us on Pages and Voices, a source for local authors and their stories. From the studios of Access Fort Wayne at the Allen County Public Library in downtown Fort Wayne, Indiana, I'm your host, Meg Bell. A special thank you to Kay Gregg for her work engineering and editing this episode. We've explored fascinating stories and insightful discussions today, but our journey doesn't end here. Find more episodes of Pages and Voices wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned for more inspiring conversations with the area's authors and their insights into the written word. Until next time, keep turning the pages, and we look forward to welcoming you back soon.